Everybody, welcome back to HR Heretics. Today we're doing a special episode on the recent news from Scale AI. So let me set the scene and I'll introduce our special guest. So Scale AI just raised $1 billion at a $13 billion valuation, 13 somewhat change. They are one of the biggest players, obviously, in the AI space. Now, their CEO had a post last week, and he's coming up with a new term called MEI, which stands for Merit, Excellence, and Intelligence. I'll read a couple of passages from this, and then I'll turn it over to Richard and Kelli. So a couple of things that Alex, who's the CEO, said. He said, number one, scale is a meritocracy, and we must always remain one. Hiring on merit will be a permanent policy at scale. I think of our guiding principle as MEI, merit, excellence, and intelligence. That means we hire only the best person for the job. We seek out and demand excellence, and we unapologetically prefer people who are very smart. We treat everyone as an individual. We do not unfairly stereotype, tokenize, or otherwise treat anyone as a member of a demographic group rather than as an individual. We believe that people should be judged by the content of their character, and as colleagues, be additionally judged by their talent, skills, and work ethic. There is a mistaken belief that meritocracy somehow conflicts with diversity. I strongly disagree. No group has a monopoly on excellence. So, today we have a special guest, which is Richard Nee. Richard Nee was the head of people at Scale from the very earliest days all the way until about last year. So Richard, thanks so much for joining us. I want to kick it over to you to get your take on Alex's post and how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, excited to be back on here with you, Nolan and Kelli. So I think there's a few perspectives to look at this. I think one, just purely from a practical perspective of, is this going to be net good for the company? And it's often, that's correlated with, is this the right decision? Is this morally correct? I think all those things are correlated. But I do think, and it's going to be impossible to prove this will probably actually be net good for the company, just judging based off of how the last few years, the last couple of years in particular, gone, and how tech has sort of been reacting, I think, and to some of the big shifts in diversity and sort of the perspectives that have been big focuses for companies in the last few years. I think this has sort of been a counter reaction to that. My initial sense is that just judging from the LinkedIn comments and the comments from folks that I've talked to who have spoke about this, is that this is going to be more of an attracting force, and it's not going to actively reject or repel most people, I believe. But I guess that'll remain to be seen. I do think there are some ways in which this was executed that I'm not the biggest fan of, but generally I do think this is probably actually be good for Scale. And whether it is good for Scale, just from a retention and hiring perspective, will be a big signaling for many of the companies as they adjust their hiring practices.
What do you not like about it?
So I think the thing I don't like is how it was positioned as MEI is counter DEI. And I think he explicitly said, as you just quoted, that merit is not counter diversity. At the same time, it was very explicitly chosen. The acronym MEI is signaling that it sort of implies that the M is in contrast to a D. And on the flip side, I do understand why he chose that, because unfortunately, in many cases, advocates of diversity have been opposed to merit as a term, and I think we each have anecdotes. But I think the vast majority of people, including myself, who are quote unquote pro-diversity, as if you can simply categorize people as pro or anti-diversity, would argue that that is not counter to merit, but it can be perceived that way.
Got it. Kelli, what's your take?
This is a big one. I remember, it was 10 years ago now that I started at GitHub, this story. And if you all remember GitHub, in addition to the huge, bar and $10 million office, they created the Oval Office. And there was a huge carpet, right, a rug in the middle of it. And it said, right, meritocracy on the seal of this carpet. And I remember one day it was gone. It was removed. And I bring that up because this is not the first time this has happened, right? That meritocracy, DEI have conflicted, and we've talked a lot about patterns on this show, and things come around full circle, and I think we're here again. And obviously, Scale AI is talking about MEI very, very, very clearly. I just get fired. I get a bit annoyed at this, to be honest. Like. Silicon Valley theoretically has some of the smartest people in the world, and we can't frickin' realize that both things are true, or we want to be true. I don't understand that. I don't understand how a reasonable person can't say we want the best people for the job. And sometimes there are great people that could be great and the best person for a job, but they haven't had the same luck, background, privilege, equitable situations to get there. And we have to work a little harder to bring those people in and then assess them against a whole group of people that could be the best for the job. So I think that once again, media, we see it all the freaking time. We have the election coming up. People just get real swept up, real emotional, which I understand why, really fired up. And I myself am guilty of this sometimes. And we tend to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And we don't look at what is true or what is not in all situations. And I will end by saying I will talk to anyone who disagrees. I think any smart, reasonable, objective person can sit down and pick the good things about DEI, the good things about merit, and put them together. Why is this an either or? You've accused me on former episodes, Nolan, of talking about meritocracy. You said once, what you're describing is a meritocracy. Let's have that and make sure we have fucking diverse people and we're doing the right things for people who aren't as privileged as people like us potentially on this call. So I'm sorry. I think I'm getting goosebumps now, but I've seen it for 25 years and we still haven't figured it out because we're silly humans. That's what I think.
I love it. All right. So what's really interesting about this is when I first saw it, I was like, not interesting. Like, I don't think it's interesting. Like, I think what Alex basically did was a little bit of like following Coinbase's footsteps, which took place 4 years ago. And so when I first saw it immediately on Twitter. And my take was like, okay, like not that interesting, like MEI, DEI, like that's cute. I see what you did there. But like, this isn't news for me. And then what happened is I'd say maybe 8 of my friends who work in HR were like, hey, have you seen this? Like, you guys should talk about it. And that surprised me because I was like, wait, hold on. Like, what's interesting about this? Then I started to talk to people and engage with people who were bothered by it. And so I just want to steelman the side of the folks that say they have a problem with meritocracy. And here's what I'm hearing. I think the first thing is that meritocracy is selectively applied. And so it's hey, well, we have, we say we're a meritocracy, but, the CEO's kid is now an intern. Or like, the investor who led our last round got somebody in the back door and we keep them around even though they're a middling performer. And I think that's the piece that like really bothers people is that meritocracy is imperfect and it's talked about as if it's this panacea to solve all problems with performance and low performers and things of that nature. I think that's the steelman case of the other side, which I do understand.
Hey everyone, we'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Real talk, most talent leaders haven't yet cracked how to leverage AI for meaningful impact on their hiring processes and business goals. But the leaders who are effectively using AI to transform their recruiting team's efficiency and quality use MetaView. MetaView is the AI assistant for the interview process. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations, like intakes, interviews, and debriefs, then provides perfectly summarized notes of everything that was discussed. That means your people can focus on creating human connections with candidates during calls and save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. But it's so much more than just a time saver, because perfect notes means perfect data. For every candidate in every pipeline, hiring teams can make confident, informed decisions, and talent leaders can finally take control of the interview process. Join forward-thinking talent leaders at high-performing organizations like Brex, HelloFresh, and Quora, and check out MetaView. Head over to metaview.ai/heretics to talk to one of MetaView's product experts, or get started for free. You'll be up, running, and AI-enabled in minutes.
Kelly, this morning, Colleen texted us, Colleen McCreary, friend of the show, and Netflix just put out their new culture doc today. I haven't had a chance to do the double click. I read it once. I think it's really good. And I think one of the things that they do really well is they talk about it being imperfect. They talk about themselves not living up to the standards all the time. And I think that's the piece that's missing for folks, to make it more of a like a togetherness, hey, this is what we should strive for, even though we're not going to be perfect all the time. I had this quote on LinkedIn about from Winston Churchill, and he said, it's been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except all the others that have been tried. And I think that that's very true here. I think merit is probably the worst form, but nothing else is better than it. And so we have to just accept that it's not going to be perfect. So that's my first take. In addition, when I think about these people who don't like merit, I think the thing I'm most bothered by is I'm not hearing an alternative solution. And as I engage in people and I'm trying to learn, I think all of us on this show, Kelly, this is the reason why we're doing the show, right? It was what we said at the very beginning. We want to learn. And I think people who come and poke holes in a system without proposing solutions or an alternative system are not engaging in a real debate. I think they're just casting stones from the outside. And, it's really easy to do that. And frankly, it's kind of like the fans in the cheap seats at a baseball game, yelling at an outfielder. You're not involved in the game, but hey, you get your 2 cents in, good for you. And I think that's my problem with that side. Now, if I look at Alex and I look at the post and I see why some people are upset about it, I think, Richard, you nailed it to where, MEI versus DEI. And I think what Alex is trying to do is to rile people up. And even though he explicitly calls out with the one sentence that diversity should not be opposed here, I think he did that for a very specific reason. And I think part of that is to rile people up, because you have to do that in order to achieve virality in social media. Yeah. So that's my take. Richard, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true. And I think Scale is in a position right now where they can afford to be on the news. They just raised a big round. The business has gone really well. I've had other friends of mine who are thinking about doing similar things. Should they make this announcement? Should they launch the type of thing? And I think it's a lot different if your company is doing well. I think that's another interesting thing for me is I don't think, and I'm not an insider at Scale anymore. I do not, constantly keep tabs on people and everything. But to my best knowledge, this wasn't in reaction to anything. I think he mentioned the Coinbase thing a few years ago, but my understanding when I looked into that situation is it was in a reaction to Slack message. It was a reaction to something being a big distraction to the company. And to the best of my understanding, this was not in reaction to an event or a situation that occurred at Scale, which means it was more of a proactive, hey, we think this is going to be really good for us from a hiring perspective and a retention perspective, more than we need to play defense on some topic. I mean, just a month ago, I think Scale hosted a hackathon for women in particular, so it's Women in Tech Generative AI Hackathon. Alex was there. He was making the rounds, talking to folks. He didn't have to be there. The company can still host this type of thing. You could argue that's not a diversity initiative, but you could argue it is because it was just for women, for example. And so I genuinely don't believe that Alex is anti-diversity. And I genuinely believe he does believe in the words that he's saying in the post. At the same time, probably the choice of MEI was explicit, and it was a calculation that this would be net good for the company if it did go viral and it attracted more people to want to join Scale, which is hiring a lot of folks right now.
That is a great example, Richard, of it actually can be both. And I think a lot of folks are assuming it's all this or all that. And you know what, both of you, please disagree with me. This all comes down to people. Hey, everyone. We'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
Here's a crazy stat. Between hybrid and frontline employees, about 80% don't typically work in an office. So it's no surprise that digitally engaging employees is the number one concern for CEOs as companies go hybrid. But as hybrid is quickly becoming the norm, it's easy for workplaces to start feeling a little less human. Yet delighting a digital workforce is possible, and it can even be, dare we say, fun. That's where WorkVivo, Zoom's employee experience platform, comes in. If you've ever recoiled at the thought of a static intranet that looks like something you built in 1995 using MS Paint, have no fear. WorkVivo is a dynamic, intuitive, accessible, and mobile-first tool. People actually like using it, which is why companies like Ryanair, Dollar General, Virgin, and more have rolled it out to hundreds of thousands of employees. WorkVivo's activity feeds, spaces, shoutouts, and live streams, among other features, help elevate the employee experience like never before. The result? Dramatically better retention, productivity, and most importantly, connectedness. A greater sense of the belonging we all crave at work, whether we sit at a desk or drive a truck. Make WorkVivo the digital heart of your organization and achieve limitless human connection. Head to workvivo.com to book a demo and make sure you tell them that Nolan and Kelli from HR Heretics sent you. There's a world where your CRM is powerful, easily configured, and deeply intuitive. Attio makes that a reality. Attio is a radically new CRM built specifically for the new era of companies. It's flexible, easily configures to your unique data structures, works for any go-to-market motion from self-serve to sales-led. Attio automatically enriches your contacts, syncs your emails and calendar, lets you create powerful reports, and quickly build Zapier-style automations. The next era of companies deserves more than a one-size-fits-all CRM with an outdated UX. Join 11 labs, replicate, modal, and more. Try Attio instantly at attio.com. That's ATTIO.com and tell them Nolan and Kelli from HR Heretics sent you.
You pick it. You know what I mean? Like Colleen's Medium post, you read it, both of you probably, but like she talks about trust in the people running these systems. Like it could be a government, it could be a company, it could be a school, it can be a jail, it can be anything, you name it. But what this comes down to, meritocracy, DEI, all of it is people that are making decisions and creating these systems, right? It takes one decision for the CEO to be like, nope, we're doing all these things, diversity, meritocracy, whatever you call it. And then a day later, bringing in their kid to be an intern and bringing like, that's what this boils down to is corruption. And I don't say that as like a big scary word, but corruption in the system. And I do believe the people that are getting really upset about this, they were impacted in some negative way by someone corrupting something that was against the trueness of a system they created. And I empathize with that. I get that. And you have others who never were impacted by it. And they're kind of like, they don't really say anything or they don't care, you know, but it all comes down to the people that are running these things in any organization across the world and making these decisions and the people that get impacted by it, either negatively or positively. That's what I think.
And there's very few checks and balances.
Totally.
Yeah.
You know, like it is generally companies are run from an authoritarian standpoint. Like there's one leader and they get what they want, and typically the exec team like gets what they want. And so you could say things. I think everyone has experienced this, Kelli. It's a really good point. You could say these things, but your actions, if they don't align with your words, bother people. It's hypocritical. And
totally.
To me, that really bothers me.
And now, humans are imperfect. So I don't want to be cynical, but is this ever going to end? Because we're imperfect. I mean, maybe we'll be robots and we'll be AI and we'll be like, calculated to not make shitty decisions. That would be interesting. But that's how it is. And we mess everything up in the end.
Yeah. There's a story one of the most genius managers I ever reported to. I hate politics, like company politics. It bothers me. I think it like slows things down. I don't like how, I get as somebody who deeply does believe in merit. Politics, I think, is actually counter to merit. And so I was complaining to this person about politics, and he said something to me I'll never forget. He said, well, Nolan, you better get fucking used to it because company politics are everywhere. And I honestly, at the time, I thought it was just ridiculous. Like, I thought less of him as a leader when he told it to me. And it took me years to realize that he was right. And that is the imperfection of humanity that you're referring to, Kelly. Like, it just is part of who we are. Humans are by definition imperfect. And so I think what people are really looking for here is just to call that out and to strive for like the higher goal, like democracy. Like, democracy is very imperfect as well, but we are striving for that imperfect union. Like, we want to get better every day. And I think, honestly, if Alex had just included a line that, like, today we are imperfect, tomorrow we are imperfect, but we are striving to be better every day, I think a lot of the detractors for this post would not have much to stand on.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I think we should talk about this more. I think it's a very hard situation and topic driven by largely one's own experiences within any organization and leadership and things that have happened to them or around them that they've seen. And those can be either good things or they can be not good things.
Yeah.
But we have to start thinking about these things in a more complex manner. Like, this is not a simple
binary.
And I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed or whatever, but it's not hard for me to see that the right answer is a blend of things. And even if we blend them perfectly, we can still screw it up, or we can do great things with it, and know that too.
Now, I want to make one other point, which is around the expectations of tech companies. So I was thinking about this last night, and Google went public in 2004, and they built literally the best business model of all time. They have a monopoly in search. Apple similarly has almost a monopoly on hardware. These companies print billions of dollars in revenue per quarter. They have more than $100 billion in the bank. They have both stood on the hill and said, diversity is important to us. We want to invest in this. We are willing to make the trade-off of diversity, which is taking more time in hiring. They have the luxury to be able to do these things because of their business model. Now, my take is that expectations in tech are driven by those two companies. Everybody knows somebody who works at Apple or Google. Many people have interviewed at Apple or Google and had free lunch during the day. And those expectations trickle down into the rest of the tech ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we're seeing now, given the era of interest rates being zero is over, and money's more expensive, and investors are squeezing CEOs and leadership teams for more profit and more growth and more revenue, is now CEOs are saying, like, I actually can't make this trade-off of moving slower. Because I think that's one of the things that I've tried to talk about in the past, and maybe I haven't delivered it very well. But I do think one of the aspects of, if diversity is important to you, you have to have a bigger top of funnel. And that bigger top of funnel, especially if you don't have a company brand, takes more time via sourcing. And time is a luxury that is only afforded to you if you have money or a great business. And you could say, we are willing to wait. And I think one of the things that's currently happening right now is companies are saying, we don't have time. We are running out of runway. Like, the economy is hard. It's harder than ever to close business. And so we need to move faster. What's your guys' take on that? Do you guys agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think companies are being pressured by investors, by their employees, because a lot of times employees, they don't like to admit out loud, like, what I want to do is to make a lot of money, and I want this company to be really successful, and I want my equity to be worth a lot. But that's really the vast majority of people do really feel. So I think, I was talking to a new grad who was saying, Scale just raised this big round. They're still only up 2x on versus when they joined. And that's, it's still great, but compared to a lot of the rest of the folks who were graduating a few years prior, that's not as much. And all of her friends were, they're all flat or underwater. And so I think, the revealed preferences are coming out from investors, as you say, but also from employees. There's also a calculation that the employees don't actually want you to take more time because they want your business to do well, because we all benefit from that as well.
And can you blame them? I mean, can we blame them? We've lived in a world. I mean, I've been in venture for 15 years, and you lead with valuation. You hire people based on scenarios and exits, and what that looks like. Every all hands, we're talking about IPO timelines. Like, it's a thing. We've burned that into people's brains, and I'm guilty of it too. That's what you lead with. We get grueled on equity price. Again, these scenarios, how much am I going to make? What is it? $5, $10, $20, $40 a share. People are calculating. I mean, that's how it is. And I've talked to a lot of folks now where it's not, duckies and horsies anymore. And you got to work harder for less a lot of times. And a lot of people are like, geez, well, I don't love tech that much.
Well, and you got to make trade-offs. Like, it's just, this is the thing, is nobody wants to accept in every decision you make, there is a downside trade-off. And again, Google and Apple, who have really set this expectation, I think, for all of tech, are willing to wait. They're willing to take more time in recruiting. That luxury, I think, is no longer being afforded to the rest of tech who don't have monopolized business models. And I think that's where this rub is really starting to happen, is because leadership teams are coming out and saying, like, we need to grow or we're going to die. And yes, that is just objectively where we are in today's economy.
And a lot of them want to potentially swing and die before getting acquired.
Yeah.
Especially acquired by a PE firm, which is a loss. So you're seeing, desperation is a strong word, but you're seeing just last straws of sprints to avoid that.
Yeah. And I've heard employees complain, well, we're not going to die. But I've heard other, founders, investors say floating along, half alive is a fate worse than death as a company. Because at least if things are over, you can move on. You can do the next thing. But it's kind of like, we still have a couple of years of runway. Maybe this new product will make us last 6 more months. That's a tough thing as well. So even if you're not, if you're an employee thinking, well, my company's not going to die because of this, I think floating around half alive is also
yes. And let's also empathize. I mean, that is hard, man. That's a hard pill to swallow. 10 years of fun and money, and you barely shoot the ball and it goes swish, swish, swish in the basket. And now it's like, I mean, I do empathize how crushing that can be.
Yeah. And also for employees, like this is this is the thing many employees are starting to realize now too, is that winning is fun. Like winning is so fun and losing sucks. Like being inside of a company that isn't doing well sucks. Even if you still have 2 to 3 years of runway, it's terrible.
And killing yourself to lose sucks more. And it's like, why am I working 80 hours a week at a floating, flopping enterprise SaaS company when I can freaking work 40 somewhere else and maybe make more money? I mean, it is a wake up call, I think, for a lot of folks.
Totally. So this is the real world that we're living in. Look, I appreciate both of you for engaging in this discussion, and to our audience, please engage with this discussion. Like everyone here is learning. Like we don't have the right answers. All we have are just experiments and ideas. And so please engage with us and let us know what you all think. Let us know what you guys are trying so we can talk about it on the show and share with everybody what people are working on. So thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for the time.
Thanks all.
HR Heretics is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Econ 102, Moment of Zen, and Turpentine VC. Subscribe, 5 stars, share it on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, all the things.